The Vermont Podcast, the first episode of the Vermont Podcast. And is it 4 o'clock, Paul?
No, it is not.
It's 2:30. Why are we on at 2:30? Oh, I know why. Because we're now going to be airing every Friday at 2:30. But folks, everything else is going to be pretty much the same. Love it or hate it, it'll be me and Paul talking with managing editor Tim Page off in the wings, making comments, researching stuff when we need him to. And hopefully, please, your comments, your ideas, your suggestions, reach out. And boy, we've got 3 big subjects to cover today. We say every week, wow, what a week it was. Well, this week, more on the Mohsen Madawi, the man who was detained while having a green card, detained for his Columbia University anti-Israel activism. We have the stunning Border Patrol activity at the biggest farm in the state of Vermont. And it was not a raid. And we have an eyewitness account that was published in today's Chronicle. We encourage you to read that, and we will be talking about that, but what really happened there at that farm up in Berkshire. And we'll be talking about a report that says that Vermont has the highest increase of homelessness, over 200%, the only state in the union with an increase of over 200%. And finally, if we have time, the Vermont Senate just gave approval to banning carrying guns in bars in Burlington. Possible subject of a veto, we shall see. With that, that's the lineup. Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I had a pretty funny comment from somebody earlier this morning. I announced, of course, that we're changing the show time. And folks, honestly, it gives us a lot more flexibility calling it the Vermont Podcast. One of my friends wrote, Friday at 4 really limits your ability to have any flexibility whatsoever, naming it that.
That's true.
And then somebody said something like, Friday at 4 minutes past 2:26. I think that's what he said.
Boy, that's a sexy time.
Yeah, I was like, I don't think we're going to go with that guy. I think we'll just let that one go.
And this is good too, because I originally gave it that name because I wanted people to know like when to tune in.
Sure.
And I figured, well, it's sort of like 7 Days has a weekly newspaper called 7 Days. Why can't we have a podcast called Friday at 4?
Yes.
But really, this is about the Vermont Podcast and how Vermont impacts the rest of the world. It seems like the news is just coming out like crazy about how we are interacting with the Trump administration's sort of new initiatives and vice versa. So, Paul, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, no, I agree with your point, though, about us it's almost like every week we come in here like, man, what a week. Yeah. And I'm watching stuff around the country, and I don't see a state that's it just seems like something crazy happens here every day, or 2 things, or 3 things. So with that, here's a little update on the situation with the detainee and whose name I can never...
Mohsen Madawi.
And I always say it like totally messed up. But
which rhymes with Gandhi, which I think sometimes he's trying to kind of imitate. But anyway.
Well, maybe he is. But this is Senator Peter Welch from Vermont. And this is a tweet he posted, an ex-post he posted earlier this week on the 21st of April, and this is them together, and he writes, "When I met with Mohsen Madawi today, we spoke about how appreciative he is to have the support of Vermont and so many people from Vermont. He said one of the reasons he wanted to become a citizen was because of his belief in American democracy, and he hopes that justice will prevail in his case." So that's your Vermont Senator Peter Welch at, I believe, is the Swanton federal prison.
No, it's the state prison.
It's the
Northwest State Correctional Facility.
Okay.
It's technically in Swanton, but everyone else, with good reason, thinks that it's actually in St. Albans.
Oh,
it's sort of on the St. Albans Swanton town line.
I was just thinking, it has to maybe be some type of like immigration related.
No, it's just the feds contract with the state to hold their detainees. In fact, there was this big pushback last week saying we ought to get rid of that contract. We ought to no more holding any feds. We don't want to cooperate with them. And Governor Scott actually very reasonably, I think, said, you know, those people, those detainees, especially if they have Vermont connections, they might be better off here in Vermont.
Yeah.
You know, around their families with the sort of Vermont infrastructure around them, rather than, I don't know, Louisiana, Oregon, American Samoa, you know.
Yeah, at least here, maybe some of these folks would be treated with a little bit more. There's more room for conversation, I guess. Right. It opens up the conversation more where, like you say,
a U.S. Senator can visit him.
Exactly.
For example. And just the way, at the same time, last weekend, U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen was visiting an El Salvadorian refugee in El Salvador.
Yeah.
Made all sorts of headlines. Peter Welch, I guess, was sort of doing the same thing, going there, showing solidarity. Yeah.
Here's a little clip from Peter Welch and Mohsen Madawi from his visit.
And from the Upper Valley, Mohsen, we've been having a nice talk, but I want you to have a chance to explain to people how you're doing and what you hope to accomplish, and how is it you're staying so positive despite your circumstances?
Thank you for the visit. It really means a lot, and it reassures me of the support that I have from you and from the Vermonters as well, my people, the people of Vermont. I'm staying positive by reassuring myself in the inevitability of justice and in the deep belief of democracy. This is the reason I wanted to become a citizen of this country, because I believe in the principles of this country.
And you told me you were preparing for your citizenship exam that you thought you were going to take when you were detained. And one of the questions you were going to answer, just explain that about rights.
One of the most important questions, the most important rights is the Bill of Rights, which includes free speech on the top of these rights. Freedom of assembly, freedom of press, freedom of having religion or not having religion at all. And I learned also in this basically test that I had to study for, that the freedom of speech and religion and assembly is guaranteed to everyone in the United States,
which all sounds great. And then you see a clip of Mohsen Madawi on 60 Minutes, and Bill Whitaker asks him, but this invasion of Hamas's invasion of attack on Israel on October 7th, it was such a terrible, horrific thing. How can you justify that? And Madawi says, well, I'm not sure I justify it, but I sure can empathize with Hamas. And he does everything short of saying, I support the Hamas attack on Israel. And so I kind of got to wonder, and he was part of the organization. The depth of leadership, we don't know, okay? But he was a member of the Columbia Students for Justice in Palestine, was absolutely taking their marching orders on their, the day of the attack, on demonstrating, on messaging, on everything, calling for escalation, calling for the Hamas inspired information was calling for days of rage. They were basically the campus propaganda wing for Hamas, according to a very credible lawsuit that was filed against these Columbia student organizations. So two sides to every story. Every lawsuit gets a rebuttal. But it does, on the face of it, look like an organization that he was part of was absolutely carrying water in its protests, in its activism, its militant activism for Hamas, so I have a real, and they're since 1990 something they've been a designated terror organization. 45 Americans killed in that attack. So how far exactly does his free speech go? If it means, especially as a non-citizen, if it means carrying water for a designated terrorist organization, which he may or may not have done. I think it's partly what the due process that everyone's talking about has got to figure out. And a little word on the due process, Paul. I don't know if you've heard that word being thrown.
What?
Yeah.
Due process?
And so if you listen to...
I thought taxes were due, guy.
Yeah. Right. If you listen to some on the left, they'd say, well, he's just being taken away and treated like the way the mafia would give someone due process who's stiffed them on their bill, cement galoshes or something. But in fact, he is entitled to, and presumably will get, what's called an administrative hearing. I checked in with someone who's a court official who knows about this process, and he said that it's not so much in a U.S. Department of Justice court, but it's in an administrative court within Homeland Security. And an impartial judge who is there to give the defendant a fair trial, Mohsen Madawi, and to give the government a fair trial. You have essentially defense lawyer, prosecutor, and impartial judge. And then according to the laws governing immigration, everyone gets a fair trial. That is what is going to happen with him. That is the due process. Now, one of the questions is, okay, if the law says that the Secretary of State can deport anyone with a green card who is deemed a strategic risk to the interest of the United States, let's see, well, if it turns out that he was involved in spreading domestic propaganda after October 7th on behalf of Hamas, might that count as being contrary to the strategic interests of the United States? I would say you could make a good case for that. But again, that's why the process exists.
Well, I got to say, if anything, since literally the day of Trump's inauguration, it has been an education for all of us here in Vermont on the authority of DHS, Department of Homeland Security, and how things actually work with ICE and Border Patrol and these detainees and people that are potential threats to the United States. I've been totally educated, but still trying to figure out how this all works.
Sure.
And honestly, I think everybody is, because it's not necessarily new, right? I think a lot of folks saw this coming with the Trump administration, this kind of stuff. And I know, Guy, you had mentioned, we were in conversation with someone the other day. They asked, you were here during the first Trump administration, Guy.
Yes.
What was that like? Was it like this? Was there this polar reaction of outrage and protests?
We are absolutely seeing a rerun. It's the same playbook. First of all, large mass meetings. They had all kinds of resistance meetings on the State House lawn in 2017. And then you may remember the children locked in cages on the border. And oh my gosh, the uproar, the humanity of children locked in cages by the Trump administration. Well, it turns out that those pictures are actually from the Biden administration. But the point is,
Obama administration.
Oh yeah,
just to be
the Biden-Obama administration.
Oh, I see.
Okay?
I'm sorry.
See, I'm much cleverer than you. I remember the vice president.
I'm sorry.
No, of course you're right.
Yes, I just want to make sure we were on the same page.
Thank you. See, yeah, how does Guy like it when Paul corrects him?
He doesn't like it either. Yeah, he doesn't like it either.
Okay. Well, thank you, though, for that. There was that sort of visceral, angry, don't confuse me with the facts kind of reaction.
And when you look at the numbers right now, too, so far the Trump administration, they haven't deported that many people. If you look at the comparisons to former presidents, including Obama, and I don't have the stats right here to look at, but I was reading something the other day that was saying, Trump's kind of known as this anti-immigration president, and I would probably say that he is.
Oh yes.
But he's definitely had trouble getting that accomplished. It seems to me a lot of Americans. This year, yeah, and I think a lot of people voted for Donald Trump, myself included, on the premise of mass deportations and removing illegals from the country. He ran on that, and I think he's meeting a lot more resistance than I think a lot of us expected, and myself included. I didn't. Well,
you may have noticed, Paul, we've been running something called the POTUS press pool.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So yesterday we did a column on Tom Homan, who's the border czar,
Yeah.
and also from upstate New York, as it happens. And in the last paragraph of this very lengthy press gaggle that he had, he said, we may have to slow this down. So even Tom Homan was saying, this may not go quite as quickly as we would like.
Yeah.
And it's because of the judges who are, rightly or wrongly, are kind of slowing this process down. But he said, we're going to be out on the streets. We're still going to be arresting them. We're still going to be taking the gangsters off the streets. And it's just a question of how soon they get out of the United States.
And before we go to ad guy, I just want to make a quick comment. It's like, it breaks my heart that we can just let people run over the border for 4 years and invade the country, and then when we try to do something about it, then we're told that you're breaking the law and you're unconstitutional. It's like, well, wait a second. What about all the constitutional rights of Americans who are born citizens and the folks that immigrated here legally, like most of our ancestors, by the way?
Right.
What about the Constitution there? Does that not matter?
That conversation happened between Tom Homan and the press. And he said to the press, where were you? Where was the anger when they were the human trafficking and the fentanyl and the unstopped, unchecked immigration? Where were you? And the answer, of course, is they weren't.
Yeah. Well.
Any comments?
Yes, we do have some comments. Before we get to them, though, I want to go to an ad.
Go for it.
Today's episode is brought to you by Procter Gas. Are you a homeowner wishing to convert your home to propane gas so you can enjoy energy efficiency and off-grid living? Alternatively, you may be a contractor seeking propane tank and line installation related services for your clients. Either way, our propane company is here to help. Procter Gas provides comprehensive services and a variety of products from leading brands in Rutland and beyond. Procter Gas, Judy Taranovich and Procter Gas was our first sponsor of Friday at 4. Welcome to the Vermont Podcast. We both got our hats going for a little props, right, Guy?
You bet.
But we just want to thank you all out there. Or thank you, Judy, again for your support and getting us through our first year, and we'll hope you stick around for another year of Vermont podcasting. So with that, I'll go to some comments. I have a comment from Vermontster. He writes, ship him out, talking about Madawi. Big Siege writes, was it the Vermont democracy or the Vermont Republic that was formed in 1777? The answer to that question is the Vermont Republic. It was formed in 1777, and it was absorbed by the United States in 1791.
Excuse me. We intentionally joined.
That's right.
We allowed the United States to join us.
They have,
Okay? Let's get it clear now, Paul.
Oh, of course. Yes, of course.
Because my family was here, and this is what they said.
Well, I have a comment from EJ who writes, Peter Welch supports gender-affirming care for youth. Peter Welch supports late-term abortion. I think he's just throwing it out there, just letting us know.
Well,
just letting us know.
Yeah.
Thank you for your comment, EJ. And Big Siege has a comment that says, there are 13 million green card holders in our country. We want them all out. The U.S. government is prioritizing the only those who criticize Israel. Oh, wait a second. I'm sorry. This is a typo fix. There are 13 million green card holders in our country. We want them all out. The U.S. government is prioritizing the expulsion of those who criticize Israel. We'll have to slow this down unless the person is anti-Semitic. That's what Big Siege commented. I mean,
I don't think we want all green card holders out. I mean,
I don't feel that way.
There's a reason they give out green cards.
Yeah, it's necessary. And
Yeah.
I think Guy and I, we've been a little bit of an education this week on the reality that migrant workers are here and we need them. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a lot of people that say, we're kind of dependent in Vermont on people from not here. And if they're here legally, we should definitely maybe consider that. I mean, we have to consider that as the reality. We can't just kick them out just because they're green card holders. That doesn't,
yeah, good heavens.
So that doesn't really fly with me. But that kind of maybe would be a good way to lead us into our next story, which is the Border Patrol situation up in Berkshire, Vermont. Berkshire, Vermont, at the largest dairy farm in Vermont. I believe
right.
the largest farm in Vermont, if you count the cattle head.
Sure.
Cattle head. So
Yeah.
I think it's quite a lot. But point is, a really interesting situation. We initially reported it as a raid. Turns out it wasn't exactly a raid.
Right.
I'll be honest, I don't know what else you call it based on what we'd been described to at that point.
We're responding to a call.
Responding to a call. Yeah.
Which we didn't know at the time.
That's right.
All we knew was a whole bunch of Border Patrol had descended upon this farm. So call us crazy, but we called it a raid.
So here's the photo from, when was this guy? Wednesday? I guess it was Wednesday, but it happened maybe Tuesday evening.
Yeah.
This took place.
Right.
And this was sent to me kind of randomly from a friend who I can't disclose who it is, but he said, hey, you might want to check this out. Heard this is happening. And I thought, that's a huge story if that's real. I mean, I see the photo, so there's definitely Border Patrol, as you can see in that photo there. There's definitely some Border Patrol in that image and some other vehicles that we don't know what they are. So one has to wonder, is that ICE? What is this? You know, it's definitely feds. That seems to me anyway. So I show up at the State House and I sit down with Guy. I said
it's about 11 o'clock, right?
Yeah, I think it's probably around midday, lunchtime kind of.
Yeah.
And I said, well, Guy, I have a story for you. And he said, what, basically? He was on his computer doing something. And I said, apparently there was maybe a raid last night at a farm. Some migrants got arrested, is what I'm hearing. Maybe we should try to find something out about it. And of course, being in the State House, you know, a guy using people that he knows was able to find somebody who had firsthand or secondhand knowledge on the situation. So he was able to provide us with what he knew had taken place. So it kind of confirmed, yes, something did happen, and here's what we're hearing so far. You know, we're putting the story together. We're talking with this person. They're telling us what they told us, and we're thinking, man, like, this is a really, really big story. As soon as we publish this, it's going to explode. You know, we know that it is. And we've had this happen a couple times where we kind of know, oh, okay, we got a big story here. But when a story really takes off, it just, everything for us increases. You know, viewership and likes and people commenting and everything. And that can be like this wave, right? So we're walking into the situation knowing what we have, this very sensitive bit of information that we're about to publish, and we wanted to make sure that we get it right. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it. We wrote it up, published it, and you know, credit to WCAX. They actually did give Vermont Daily Chronicle credit.
Yeah, that was nice of
I
them.
thought that was really nice of them. I appreciate that. You know, just gives us a little attaboy, I guess.
Sure.
I don't know.
We'll take him or we can get him.
That's right. But I don't know, Guy. We've definitely received a bit of some pushback on our initial reporting.
Sure have.
But I know that you've had some conversations with different people, and we've put out a new story today. Somebody who had firsthand account, who witnessed, an eyewitness of the situation. So maybe just tell us a little about.
The first thing we did on Thursday, our follow-up story was essentially, it's not a raid. It was not a raid. We're still not exactly sure what the Border Patrol was doing there, why they'd responded. We know the governor and some Anson Tebbets, the Ag Secretary, said that it seems that they were called there. They've given a tip that some people were trying to, they're so close to the border up there, that some people were entering illegally, and so they're responding to that call. So that afternoon, I got an email from a woman named Jocelyn Riley. And Jocelyn Riley is one of these Vermonters who sometimes just comes out of the woodwork and you go, wow, I never knew there was such a person. She's a Vermont native, a nurse who finished her education down in Florida because she said it's so much cheaper down there. And 90% of her clients or her patients in the Miami area were Spanish speaking. So she learned the language. And when she moved back up to Vermont, she developed a little side business of providing translations for the immigrants. If they need, for whatever reason, if they need someone to communicate to an English-speaking person, she does it. She will occasionally run errands for them. And there she was on the farm, Tuesday afternoon, pulling a box of tortillas out of her trunk, handing them to an immigrant worker because she'd gone and made a run to the store for him. And a Border Patrol cruiser drives by, and both of them go, happens all the time. And then another one drives by. And then another one drives by, and the guy says, there's another one. You don't see that very often. And pretty soon you hear people running, people yelling, migra, migra, which is the slang for the cops, the migrant police. And a bunch of people were running into their trailers, and the reason was that from all, like 4 different corners, there were all these Border Patrol agents running towards this group of people. So they figured, not unreasonably, this must be a raid. As it turns out, it was not a raid, in that sense anyway. They had gotten, after everything calmed down a little bit, they came over to Jocelyn Riley, the agents did, and she said they were actually very sheepish. They were apologizing. They were saying, this isn't a raid. You're just the wrong person in the wrong place at the wrong time. They'd asked her for her keys and to not go anywhere because they thought that she might be the getaway car for the people who they had gotten a tip were coming from the border across the farm acreage. And they'd seen someone emerge from a wood line with a backpack and figured, that's them, and they go get them. So it turns out they were just workers who were coming out of the sugar bush. They'd been doing some work, on the tap lines and stuff out there. There are like 50 workers, migrant workers on this farm. So they were very apologetic, and they emphasize, Border Patrol, we will not be raiding churches. We will not be raiding schools. We will not be raiding farms. This is not a farm. This is not a raid.
Yeah.
Which raises the question then, okay, how come they arrested 8 people if that was the case? And I asked that to Jocelyn Riley, and she said she's not sure, but her best take on this is they were running.
Yeah.
The BP came, and they started running in the other direction. They were told to stop. They didn't. Actually ended up chasing them through a milking parlor, and cows do not like people running and yelling around them at all. That's, hey, what's their livelihood is these animals. So that's not a good thing to be happening. And they said her thought is they were arrested because they ran. And I don't know about you, Paul, but if a cop tells me stop and I run, I think that's A, suspicious, and B, I'm not sure, but I think it's also illegal, just for a citizen to do that.
Yeah.
It's fleeing arrest or something like that? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think that's I don't know. I completely agree with you, right? Like if you have nothing to hide, I don't know why you'd run. But I can also understand maybe it's just some traumatic experience. They've experienced stuff like this. It's scary. It probably is scary. I'm sure it's terrifying.
Can you imagine?
All the time you're worried about this. But, as I've read the story, I hear you telling me it, and I've just been trying to wrap my head around this situation all week. What was this? To me, and in our conversation too with a source at the State House, everyone was really concerned and kind of wondering, like, what is Border Patrol doing? Are these some guys that just showed up from Texas and this is like they're used to it being a little more aggressive and
Cowboys?
Yeah, cowboy kind of style. Right. Like we gotta do more. And I guess I think I don't know. I think there's more to it than what we know. And I'm kind of speculating, right? Mm-hmm. I'm just speculating and talking, but based on the response from all of the statewide officials, Becca Ballant, Bernie Sanders, Peter Welch.
What were they saying?
Well, there's a handful of comments, but I'll pull one up here. This is from Bernie Sanders on the 23rd, which is, so what was that, 2 days ago? This is on Wednesday night. After we had published the story, he said, Trump's effort to deport migrant farm workers will only disrupt families, raise food prices, and put more pressure on struggling farms. It's exactly the wrong approach. The time is long overdue for real immigration reform and a path to citizenship for Vermonters. And he wrote, he basically said, today the following statement on the detention of 8 farm workers in Vermont by the Trump administration. Trump wants to deport migrant agricultural workers. This will only disrupt families, raise food prices, and put more pressure on struggling farms. So that's Bernie's response, which comes as no surprise. I just find it so interesting.
I think he's right. Does Trump want to deport farm workers?
I don't think he does. I mean, I think they do want to deport as many illegals as possible. But I think the kind of common sentiment amongst people that I know that have worked for immigration and Border Patrol is like, they're not really interested in the low-hanging fruit of people that are just working on the farms as much as they're interested in criminals and gang members and real violent people. That being said, I don't know, Guy. Part of me thinks if you're here illegally, you should go, because we don't have enough in this state in this country right now for the people that are here. There's a homelessness or a housing crisis, of course, in Vermont, and we're going to get more into that later.
Sure.
A 212% increase in homelessness since 2020,
Yeah.
right? And
Yes.
what else happened
Yes.
since 2020? The border has been basically wide open. And I'm not necessarily saying they're definitely connected, but I've had some people reaching out to me saying,
It's not a crazy thought.
hey, Vermont cares more about migrants and illegal aliens than it does about people that lived here.
Yeah.
And there's some research you could do, and you should look into this, about programs and incentives for immigrants to come here. And there's more on that, right? There's more than just me talking about it. And more than just people messaging me about it. There's real life stories that I know of people in Vermont, and it's anecdotal, right? So there's examples, but this is happening. This has happened. So I don't know. I feel for these people. I also get the sense that a lot of them have similar values to me and you.
They do.
I think that's typical.
Family, hard work. A lot of them are religious.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
And they care about working a good job and earning a good pay. I have nothing wrong with that. It's the premise, right? We don't have a country if we don't have laws. And if we have a law that says you can't be here, right? We don't have a country if we don't have borders. And then if we don't enforce the law, then what does anything mean, right?
Are people commenting on this? I'm just curious.
Yeah, we do have a couple of comments. Let's see here. I have one from Losang Ludwig. She writes, or he writes, I don't know. The Vermont dairy industry receives $30 to $50 million a year from the state and federal subsidies, while workers receive about $11 to $16 an hour. Patrick Leahy tried to pass year-round H-2B visas. There's so much regulatory capture surrounding the dairy industry. We're basically exploiting a system of legalized slavery. The Milk with Dignity program is a Band-Aid on a much deeper structural problems. I couldn't agree with that more, because look, I'm named after a dairy farmer, right? If you look at the farming industry in Vermont, my family's farm and dairy farm in Northfield, Vermont, they stopped farming in like the mid-'70s, right? And since that's just one example, since the 40s, 95% of farms have disappeared in the state of Vermont, have completely left, right? If you drive around any...
What does that have to do with this, though? With this worker thing?
You mean what this person's saying specifically?
Yeah.
Well, basically what they're saying is hey, here there's a program, and this is the same for H-2B and J-1 visas, right? The J-1s that all work at Sugarbush. Basically, you can import people from foreign nations, a lot of the time from South America. Yeah. They come here, you give them housing, and you give them a paycheck and a place to live, right? And that's very common. And I know a lot of people who have used that program, like at Sugarbush, for example, where I used to work, by the way, and not that I want to still work there, but point is, I've seen people use that to eventually immigrate here. I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing that they did that. They got through the process. But the point is like the milk industry and the dairy industry in the state, people want to act like us talking about this story is destroying the milk industry, and we're trying to ruin the milk industry. right? Or the dairy industry. The dairy industry's been dead for a really long time.
Well, but the other side of that, we do still have a dairy industry, just a lot more bigger farms, fewer farms, but bigger farms. So the idea that if we lose some of these workers, the farms are just going to implode. And I heard one dairy farmer this week say, get ready for $10 milk. $10 milk.
Yeah.
If we don't have the workers, what's going to happen here? And that is, if you took out all of the migrant workers off dairy farms, you would have a big problem. The flip side of that this Jocelyn Riley brought up, because, Paul, Vermonters don't want to work on farms. Anson Tebbets texted me this morning, our Secretary of Agriculture, and he said the state has been trying to get Vermonters, native-born Vermonters, to work on farms. They're not interested. The work is so hard, and frankly, the money's not so bad. This Jocelyn person was telling me that, really, like up to $750 to $1,000 a week, free housing, free heat, free electricity, free Wi-Fi, free garbage removal, and for the Spanish speakers, apparently there's even a free Latin TV satellite program. So for the plum jobs, for the really good full-time, high-skilled dairy farm jobs on these farms. So believe it or not, she says there is a large pool of unemployed migrants in Vermont, living in Vermont, who are waiting for these jobs to open up. Because they've been coming in during the Biden, not the Obama, during the Biden administration, because the borders were so lax. So if there's a guy who maybe is milking cows on a farm, well, his brother's living here now, and his family, and his nephews, and his cousins, and his friends, and they're just kind of waiting for these to show up. That's what this woman, who is on the ground, indisputably, she's on the ground. This is what she sees. Now, I ran this by Anson Tebbets, and he said, really, I haven't heard of that, and all I can tell you, and this is what the dairy industry told us yesterday as well at the State House, which is they cannot get Vermont workers to work on farms. The work is just too long, it's too hard, and you can pay free housing, whatever, not interested.
I find that an interesting point, because I don't know. I'm not sure that that's true necessarily, because I know people that actually were working on farms but couldn't do it because they couldn't afford to do it anymore. And actually that farm closed specifically.
Right.
And there's so many examples of this, and I'm sure that for a lot of these migrants, that coming here and living in Vermont is a better opportunity potentially than where they're from, maybe. I don't know what it's like in a lot of these countries. I've heard good things and bad about a lot of them. But I don't know, I'm not sure that giving them the opportunity to come and do that here and then move here with their brothers and their families and everybody else, come in, right? I'm not sure that that's something that we should just set the precedent of, because, Vermont people don't want to work on the farms. I'm not necessarily sure that I believe that.
So
by the way, as somebody who...
is that true?
Is that true?
It may not be true. And even if it is true, what if suddenly Trump really did follow through and all the migrants are gone? Well, what are we going to do then? I've got a feeling someone would be ramping up a program somewhere that incentivized, that basically took, women who are coming out of prison who want a new start at life, or people who just want a new start and want some housing. They don't mind working. They like animals. And for them, it's a good match. And that you would have a connection there.
I just think they want to say, no, we're dependent on these, we need this, and I'm legal migration, right? And that's the other thing, it's like, okay, we can talk about...
Right now, they kind of do, though.
We do. The states do.
Well, and the
yeah, but
farmers do.
it's kind of a race to the bottom in that sense. That's kind of my point. Like, hey,
Okay.
we need this this commodity, this group of people who's willing to do this work.
Yeah.
But I can think of so many people that are native-born Vermonters that could absolutely use an opportunity on a farm,
Right.
but they're not given the same opportunities as others. And I think that there's something to that,
Yeah.
Guy. I'm kind of hard pressed to believe that young Vermonters, native Vermonters, don't want to work on the farm, especially as one that kind of wants to become a farmer himself. So
Right. There probably are some. I'm just thinking with the drug crisis being what it is, I think back in my day, Paul,
Yeah.
there probably were when drugs weren't such a thing, and the work ethic, the Vermont work ethic, was not a joke. It was the real deal.
yes,
Okay. I'm not sure it is now, and I think there's reasons why you don't have as big of a pool of people who are willing to work on farms. Because boy, the hard work.
I think there's definitely plenty of reasons why people don't want to do it. And back in your day, and ultimately back in 150 years ago, Vermonters today, I think, would barely recognize the state. I mean, they might recognize some of the land,
for sure.
some of the buildings, some of the stuff, but the mentality of Vermonters of the past, in my opinion, is not the same.
Yeah.
And I think what we're talking about here, the dairy industry here and everything, is a result of a much larger societal issue, and local as here as in Vermont, as the rest of the country. When you talk about the scale of farms and the size that you need to be to make it economically sound, so that you can actually afford to pay your workers, afford to pay your taxes, actually make some profit for yourself. We've become so industrialized as an agricultural nation, right? Where these local mom and pop kind of 10 heads of dairy cattle, that's just not really
Sure.
economic anymore.
Sure.
Which there's many reasons for that. But I personally am of the mind that we need to start thinking a little bit differently about local food supply and sources and,
Right.
and where it comes from. So
Right. We're looking at that. I know when Colette buys something, she's looking at it saying, where's this coming from? And if it's coming from a source that is going to be cut off at some point, she is a lot less likely to buy that.
So here's a comment from Timothy Page, who's in the room with us. He
Hello?
says, yeah, Tim Page, he says, why don't young Vermonters take those jobs? Because young Vermonters are leaving in droves because they don't want the jobs that are here, which would include
Sure.
those jobs. I mean, look, even if you were, let's say, me, right? And I was like, all right, I want to buy a piece of property and be a farmer here in Vermont, or you were given the option to go do that next door in New Hampshire or somewhere else where it's not crazy property taxes. And I know that there's different land use and there's different structure for tax code for agricultural stuff. But I mean, it's such a challenging place to begin with,
Right.
So let's not pretend that there isn't a very serious structural problem here,
Right.
and why people don't want these
This
jobs.
is a good point, Paul. Yeah. Okay.
I'm not going to concede on that point. I would debate them. I would.
All right. Good. Good. Okay. Well, any more comments? And maybe it's time for an ad?
Sure. I have a comment from Big C. She says, it was not a raid, reads Thesaurus. It was a foray.
Okay. A foray.
Jessa Willie, she says, Twyla was playing on the porch and heard Guy's voice from the kitchen and said, hey, that's Mr. Page.
Jessa is a young mom and worship leader at Crossroads Christian Church, where we attend. And Twyla is her daughter, who's, wow, that's quite an ear. Jess has a great ear for music, and apparently Twyla has a good ear for voices. That's a good sign.
David Adams comments, my family had to move out of the state 2 weeks ago because of the housing crisis. I'm a tradesman. Nobody can afford to work on a farm for $3 to $5 an hour unless you want to live on welfare. That's what I'm wondering. Like, they say no young Vermonters want to work these jobs, and you mentioned a lot of this good pay and benefits and place to live, and I'm like thinking, I know people that were working on the farm and they were not making more than $10 or whatever the minimum wage is. It wasn't
Right.
a lot.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure that you can get paid as low as that, and it's different when you're working on a farm. I'm pretty sure of that. I'd have to look into that. But I know somebody who's being paid very low, and I think there's more to this than...
I'm sure there is.
Yeah. With that, I think quickly, though, we should go to an ad. Today's episode is brought to you by Randmar Corporation. Randmar Corporation has been serving central Vermont and surrounding areas with excavation, construction, and real estate services since 1979. They're a local, family-owned company committed to the values of Vermont. Contact Randmar Corporation for all of your contracting and real estate needs.
You know, this guy, Randy Rulo, he builds homes, good homes. If you're ever driving down Route 2A, there's that new car dealership. Right before them, Village Homes. It's right there on the road. You can see for yourselves. But homes, yeah. Now Vermont, according to a recent study, we now have the highest, over 4 years, I believe, the highest increase in the rate of homelessness of any state in the country. 212%. The next closest one, there's Illinois, another blue state. Rhode Island, another blue state, in the hundreds. And Colorado is like 92%.
I have the stats right here, folks. Vermont is 212% increase since 2020 in homelessness population. Illinois is 148%, and Rhode Island is 121. Denver, Colorado ranked fourth with just under 100% increase. Man, and this is just another stat for you all. In the combined Denver, Boulder, Aurora area, $405 million in local, state, and federal and nonprofit funding was spent in 2023 to combat homelessness, CSI noted. Can you imagine that, guy? They spent almost $500 million on the homelessness population in Denver, Colorado since 2023. And in the last 4 years, the population of homelessness has increased by 100%.
Wow. I think they are a poster child for the housing first idea. And housing first is, don't ask us what got you in this situation. Don't even make it a requirement that if you're homeless because you're abused, you need to inform on your abuser, or if you have a substance abuse problem, you need to be in a program, or if you have mental health issues, you need to be under supervision of a doctor. No requirement. We're just going to get you housed.
Yeah.
Because life for you will get so much better when you're housed, and then you will be able to work on your problems. That's the idea behind the official Vermont housing policy.
Which I kind of like. I get what they're trying to say, right? Like if you're somebody who's living in survival, right? When and people live in survival that have homes, by the way. People that live in homes, sometimes they live in a state of survival every single day. So I'm not sure that having a home is going to change it if you're already dealing with some very serious mental problems or drug addiction. Or I get the idea of why they want to do that, give somebody a place to live, you know. But hey, I'd love a free place to live too, you know. I mean, everybody would, wouldn't they? I guess that's kind of the root of the issue.
It's the question motivation. If someone has a place to stay and they want to be heading in the right direction, yeah, nothing like a good home as a start for that. But what happens when you have someone who says, look, I'm a drunk, I like being a drunk, frankly, I kind of like abusing my woman also, and I like being a public nuisance. It's how I want to live. Don't tell me how to live. Just give me a place to stay. And there, there's a lot of people who fit that paradigm.
Yeah, I'm just laughing, guy, because I can't stop picturing if somebody just took that clip of you that you just said there, all that line, and said, "Oh, look at what he said."
You're going to have to X that out. No,
I won't.
No, because that is. I'm probably hyping it to make a bit of a point, but that is a real problem.
No.
That there are a lot of people in Vermont who they love. Thank you for the services. Thank you for all the EBT help. I'm glad that if this law passes, we'll be able to use our EBT card in a restaurant, et cetera, and bring it home to our provided home. But don't talk to us about why we drink.
Sure.
Don't talk to us about all the other stuff that have landed me in this situation.
Do you think it's like why are they not allowed to talk about that? Like, why not try to get to the root cause of whatever's causing all of the problems?
I think it's seen as blame and shame and oppression. And it's assuming that it must be your fault if you do this, and my heavens, we can't possibly assign any blame. Jim, you're going to say something?
Yeah, there's another problem too. Two things. One is something that I've noticed looking at a lot of this is most of the people, and I've had a lot of in-person contact with a lot of these people. I mean, heck, at one point I took part in that program. I was kicked off because at the time I had gotten a part-time job at minimum wage.
Oh, I see.
And
The
literally,
benefits cliff.
If you even try
Okay.
to do anything, they cut you out. Also, a lot of these people are not, like you were saying, they're not Vermonters. They're tending to come from the red states, especially
Right.
Florida in the early days of this. But like a lot of them, it's like, okay, they know they're not gonna be able to do that, so then they go to the exact opposite. They go to the state where, without asking any questions, we'll just throw money out. And one
Right.
does have to wonder, though, if that would be as prevalent if, and this is a crazy idea that I've had, what if we started billing the states that are sending us their homeless?
Paul, did
think
that
it's-
come through? Did
Oh
the
yeah, no,
audio
that
pick
was.
up?
I
Oh,
think
good. Yeah.
I've turned up the sound a bit so people could hear
Good.
what Tim was saying. But
Yeah.
just for folks that didn't hear him, or you just need a little clarification. Basically, what he described is a situation where he was using one of these programs here in Vermont, which allowed him to get a place, get a room, and then when he got a part-time job or a full-time job on minimum wage,
Right.
they kicked him out. And basically said that made him ineligible for the program. So
Right.
basically what they're incentivizing is for you to be a freeloader.
Right.
It's
So the benefits cliff problem, and how do you crack that nut? And that is tough. There's no doubt. And you ask why they allow this to continue, Paul? That is one of the reasons why, is the whole benefits cliff problem. Wow.
it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
With that, I think we should probably do another ad here, folks. Today's show is brought to you by One Day in July Investment Management. As financial advisors, One Day in July provides personalized investment management and financial advice to individuals, families, and institutions. They work with clients to understand their financial goals and build investment solutions. They are fiduciaries on all accounts for all clients. I just want to thank Dan Cunningham and up in Burlington and One Day in July for their support. And I'm sorry. Oh, guy just made a face at me about Burlington. I was thinking I was saying the wrong town, but
No, you were fine. Sorry, Paul. Yeah, no, the reason I said that is Colby LaMarche, our new managing editor of the Burlington Daily News, is doing a bang-up job with that. And it seems like every day some other crazy crime story is coming out of Burlington. We can read them all on BDC. We'll put the link, the headlines, and you can go to the Burlington Daily News site from there. But the latest is, oh my gosh, some guy is going up to college women and hitting them on the butt and then running away. And they actually have some footage of him doing this. And another guy's been walking into a business. Again, you have the problems of businesses trying to, make money, and disturbed people walking in, and this guy starts headbutting everyone. The mugshot of him has, headbutt wounds on his head, and he hears voices and all that stuff, and they took him away, but again, how are you going to make a buck in downtown Burlington?
yeah.
If the headbutter is one of your customers?
Customer.
Well, he might as well be. He's coming in and patronizing your store in a sense, and terrifying your real customers
Yes.
and your help.
Yes.
And you want to try to keep the help. Cows, at least, aren't going to terrorize the workers.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Well, and like we've been saying, Guy, it's like every day we just hear about some crazy news story. You know, and we heard there was one out of Milton where a police officer actually was wounded, if I'm not mistaken on that.
Yeah.
There was a guy that...
It's an ambush.
And it was an ambush of a guy who, I mean, if you look at his Facebook page, did you have an opportunity by any chance to see his Facebook
Just read
page?
about it from Mike's story.
I looked at his Facebook page, and I don't know if it's still out there because it was sent to me before the story really broke, and I screenshot a bunch of images,
good.
and I do have them. And so the stuff this guy was talking about, he was very clearly losing his mind. I mean,
Psychotic.
he was like paranoid, like the Milton police were watching him, and like he was being mind controlled with AI and all this different stuff. And it was like really freaky to go through his page, and then to find out, you know, subsequently what was going on with him. When was it? It must have been Thursday night, or maybe it was might have been Wednesday night also, actually. But it's just like, man, every day something happens in this state where it just makes you scratch your head. And maybe that's just because that's the business we're in, guys, so I see it all now. But it seems
Something
like
to that, but I do think things seem to be getting a little crazier for whatever reason.
it definitely is.
Along that line, do you have any footage of the Senate bill on gun control?
I don't have footage. I can pull up some if you'd like, but
Excuse me.
I have the story here.
Yeah.
God bless you. This is the Burlington gun ban goes to Senate floor this afternoon.
Right,
I can pull that up here.
right. And I haven't had a chance to see how that went. But basically, City of Burlington said because we had a shooting, a killing outside of a bar, they used that as a reason. Was it just an excuse or was it a real response? Who knows? They had a citizen referendum. 86% said, yes, we want to ban guns in bars. And so the legislature introduced a Senate bill. It just passed the Senate, which basically says no carrying guns in bars. And on the one hand, the supporters say, well, this is just a common sense thing. Alcohol and guns don't mix. And you also have the critics of it saying it's just the first attempt to, well, not the first attempt, but the next attempt to practice gun control. And Senator Pat Brennan, who was raised in Burlington, brought up a really good point on the floor of the House. Where he said that when he comes to downtown Burlington to have dinner, he and his wife generally park in a parking garage. Parking garages are not safe places. Pat Brennan carries a firearm, generally speaking, wherever he goes, because he's a carrying citizen. And he says that, okay, but if I'm going to a place where I can't have a firearm on me, I'm going to have to leave that gun in the car. And I'm going to have to walk with my wife through this parking garage, unarmed, and who knows?
Yeah.
He said, and where does that help public safety? So, yeah, on the one hand, Tanya Bajovsky, who introduced the bill, the discussion on the bill, said alcohol and guns don't mix. Good point. But it makes it. But the real point, the sort of the legal constitutional point, is there's a Vermont law, 1987 Sportsman's Bill of Rights, that specifically says municipalities may not restrict the possession of firearms. It's about as black and white as you can get. And so here's the legislature voting on a charter change that tells the city of Burlington that they can prohibit the carrying of guns in bars. It's just totally against it. So why are they trying to pass it? Will they succeed in court? Because it would absolutely be challenged.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Seems expensive.
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems like guns and alcohol. I mean, go back to the old West, man. I mean, that's always been a thing. It's not like a new problem, and
Funny
they're trying to make it.
You should mention that they quoted the president of saloons in Texas and Louisiana in the 1800s, where those cities banned guns in
Oh,
those
so-
saloons.
Oh, so they
Yeah.
did do that. Interesting.
Other places, yes.
So there are places where this happens, but Vermont is what's called a preemption state, which is that you can't just, a municipality, just pass an ordinance like that. It has to be, the state law forbids it.
That's really interesting. They got me with that one.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of guns, Guy, today's episode is brought to you by Perro's Gun Shop. Discover Perro's, Vermont's premier firearms destination, nestled in Waterbury. Explore an unparalleled selection of firearms, complemented by their exclusive indoor firearms range. You can see Guy and I standing there shooting in that range. There's a couple of photos of us. Elevate your skills with our comprehensive professional training classes tailored to every level of expertise. At Perro's, they're dedicated to providing exceptional service and expertise for all of your firearms needs.
Elevating the ire of our family members who don't like us shooting guns, actually, is more like it.
And here's, folks, if you want to see the gun bill Guy and I are talking about, this is the Vermont legislative website. Just type in S131. Phil Baruth is the sponsor of it. And last recorded action, Guy, it says Senate 4/25/25, read third time, and passed.
It passed.
So
Okay.
there's your response.
So it goes on to the House. Now, what's very interesting is it only passed by 12 Republicans voted against it, which means if the governor vetoes that bill, the Senate anyway, who knows about the House, but the Senate can veto it, can sustain his veto. And I emailed the governor's people this morning saying, what does the governor think about this bill? I have not gotten a response back. I really don't know where he stands in this. My guess is he's not a fan of patchwork bills. You know, it's legal here, it's not legal here. He doesn't like that. And in general, ever since he approved one gun control bill and got a lot of grief for it, he has not been a big fan since then of gun control bills.
Interesting.
My gut would tell me this is not something he'd rush to sign. Let's put it that way.
Sure. Well, with that, Guy, I don't see any more comments here from anyone on this topic specifically. I'll see if maybe I can refresh the chat and see if anyone has some final comment they want to get in. But that's basically our run of show for today.
Great.
I think we talked a lot of different topics. Just while I have you still here, folks, if you're not currently a sustaining subscriber to Vermont Daily Chronicle, you absolutely should be. For just $9 a month, that's 30 cents a day, you can have access to, and you can have it for free anyway, but you can support free speech here in Vermont. We publish articles from people that write them into us. We'll read your comments on the show. We really try to make a focus on issues when people do reach out to us about things. We're trying to cover as much as we can, folks. So by supporting us, all you're doing is expanding our ability to do so. And we've grown a lot this year. This week was probably, arguably one of the best weeks in Chronicle history. And we would not be able to do this without you all. And just as another just quick point, you guys really are what makes this possible. It was one of you out there who reached out to me about this story earlier this week that made national headlines. So, that's what happens. He told me too. Just a quick story. He said, my wife didn't believe me when I told her that I helped break this story. And that's what keeps happening for us. It keeps happening all the time. So write comments in. Feel free to write to us. That's all my piece, Guy. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
I don't, except another good show, Paul. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And, all three of us forgot to bring any bumper stickers with us.
Yes.
But we do have bumper stickers. And send me an email, and for a measly $10, I will send you a bumper sticker. I've got one on my laptop now. So every time I have my laptop up in the State House, people can see Vermont Daily Chronicle on it. I think that's really cool. And I will be putting it in my car as well. So that's the show. Thank you very much for your attention. And please share. Please share this. Thanks.